Welcome to today's webinar, 2023 Event Predictions, Clearing the Fog with Cvent's Crystal Ball. My name is Paulina Giusti, and I manage the Cvent Meetings and Events team in North America. And I'm joined today with my colleague and partner in crime, Felicia Asedu. She is the head of event marketing in Cvent in Europe. And today we are going to have a really fun discussion around Cvent's forecasted trends for 2023. But before we get into a healthy discussion, I'd like to cover some quick housekeeping items. We've already seen a little bit of action in the chat, but want to encourage everyone to join the chat, introduce yourselves. We'll also be taking questions throughout the course of today's conversation. So be sure to submit questions in the right-hand panel. And I think with that, we're going to start today's conversation off a little bit differently. We're going to kick it off with a poll, right, Felicia?
Absolutely. And it's only right that we've come up with our own predictions for the most impactful event trends we think event planners and event marketers will face in 2023. But we really, really would love your feedback. We want to know if our trends seem right and which trends you see as being the number one trend that you'll face in 2023. So if you go ahead and open the poll, you can submit your answers right now. Now, if you're watching on your laptop or your computer, you should see the poll on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a little button you can press and it will open up the poll, and you'll also see results in real time. If you're on your phone, like me, because I'm on my phone at the same time, I'm speaking and watching and seeing what's happening, you'll see the poll tab at the bottom of your screen. So you go ahead and click on that, and then you can select your answers. So I'm going to go ahead and have a look at that as well. Paulina, what are we seeing out there?
All right, so I'm seeing the top rated one thus far is intense focus on cost savings and efficiencies. No surprise there.
Absolutely. Followed by in-person events connecting hybrid virtual digital elements for more connected event programs. I think so. I like that one. We like digital elements.
Yep. Oh, we're seeing it kind of cure a little more. Okay. I mean, I think I'm aligned to what everyone in the audience is sort of focusing on. Are you, Felicia? I think
Definitely. Oh,
yeah.
it's changing. I love the fact that this changes in real time, but why don't we kick off and see if some of what we think aligns with what our audience thinks. And if you don't think it aligns, please feel free to get into the chat, because I'd love to react to whatever you're thinking as well.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see, all of your considerations for top trends. And with that, let's kick off trend number one. So, this was listed in there. I think it was, top three, but it's really about this race for quality space and quality resources, right? We are on sort of the back end of this recovery mindset, if you will. And, there are rising venue costs and ongoing staffing shortages that are deeply impacting our venue partners, our AV production partners. And so that is definitely going to be a challenge that event organizers are sort of faced with. I think as we look at 2023, most of our programs, I imagine, have been sourced for. But one of the keys to getting ahead of these challenges is sourcing early and sourcing as many venues or vendors as possible. So there's an efficiency there, right? There's going to be the short lead times and perhaps hesitations to book meetings super early. So we're going to be fighting that sort of last minute booking mentality that still somewhat lingers, I think, from the pandemic. I read a study earlier this week, and I saw that venue contracts are shown to be one of the largest expenses. They're taking up, about 30 to 40% of most event budgets, which, sure, that doesn't come as a surprise. But I think what's important to consider is it's not just more spending, but in addition to higher venue costs, we're talking, additional man-hour increases. So people who are supporting your program, the labor behind the food and beverage, the labor behind build out for your meeting room sets, all of that is going to increase. So it's really important to try to get ahead of that planning process. And I think areas for efficiency are, if there's an opportunity to source multiple vendors and have this sort of comparison view for your own negotiation purposes, that's certainly going to help help your sourcing process and manage this sort of race for space and race for resources. I think at the end of the day, though, it's really about being really strategic about your programs and, you know, what investments for these particular programs make the most sense to solve for or solution for why your attendees are joining your events. Does every session need to be live streamed? Probably not, right? Does every meal need to have, every type of meal offering? Probably not. So it's really about making really strategic decisions for, your total event experience and what's going to most apply to your attendees. I think, one of the biggest things that my team and I are leaning into, like I mentioned earlier, is wherever we can source multiple venues or vendors in sort of a single RFP or a single request for information, we're going to be doing that because we know that responses are going to come in efficiently. They're all going to come in the same format as a response to our request for proposals. So that is something that we've definitely charged our team with as it relates to sourcing venues and vendors. So with that, anything you'd like to add, Felicia?
I mean, you've pretty much nailed it, Paulina, but I know that when we were talking about this and we put in about those relationships and building relationships, I think it is just one of those moments where you don't necessarily know Susan that works at the X hotel or Dan that works over there, and you can't just say, hey, can you just reserve that room for me? And so we're dealing with this kind of moment where we don't know each other as well as we used to, and therefore the leverage has kind of gone a little bit. And I was talking to some agencies and hoteliers recently, and they were kind of saying, why are planners putting everything on first hold? They're like, I need you and you and you and you. And that creates mistrust because they're actually like, well, which one of us are you taking seriously? So they were like, we just want the truth. But on the planner side, they were like, we just want the truth. Why have you got multiple planners on first hold? And I think it's just, there's that lack of relationship. So one of my pieces of advice that I would give, I know when we do events at Cvent, we often, and lots of people do this, they often invite you to do tours around the venue. I think even if you've seen that venue before, take the tour. Just go on the tour so you can get to know the person that's dealing with that venue again, so that you can reestablish relationships where maybe they don't exist anymore. Take the tour. I know quite often people say, oh, no, I've been here. It's like, you haven't. This is a new day. It's 2023. Go back on the tour and rebuild a relationship so you can have some leverage when you're negotiating those contracts. So that's definitely my 2 cents I'm kicking in there. But with that, let's kick over to trend number 2, which we'll do the big reveal. Where's our crystal ball gone? There it is. Is to have more connected event programs. Now, being a marketer, I know that I'm always looking at touch points, engagement points. I'm looking at where are my segments, who am I sending down what channels and funnels, where are you going to start, where are you going to next? So I'm always thinking about, do you come in and meet me at my website and then maybe you engage with some content, fill in a form. I might then invite you to a webinar like this, then invite you to an event, and so on and so forth. I think we're in that time where you've got to connect your event programs. There can't be this kind of, hey, I'm having this in-person event and then I'm doing my marketing over here. We saw that a lot during the pandemic, and we saw that a lot last year, of the interconnectivity between the marketer planner role. Sometimes the marketer is the planner, but sometimes you have, distant organizations that we need to kind of bring closer together. We can do that now through lots of different ways, through virtual events, not anchoring your in-person events, and the anchors, the virtual events are maybe the pieces in between. And so we want to have those connections between those events. Now, I often liken this, you're going to have to follow me here because I have a really strange analogy, but it's going to make sense. I often liken this to dating. I haven't dated anyone since I was about 18 because I married the first guy I met. Hey, who does that? But if you're thinking about dating and you're on one of these apps, let's say you're on Tinder and you're swiping, and then you're kind of like, yeah, I might date this person. You go, you have a date, you might have a couple of dates, nothing really popping. You didn't get the match right. The data wasn't right for the match in the first place. You have a couple of dates and then you kind of move on, and it fizzles really quickly because all you focused on was the day of the meeting. Then you've got scenario number 2 where, let's just go back to Tinder. Maybe that is the place to meet people, but you had a better match. The data matched. You were right for them. They're right for you. You had a couple of dates. It was okay. Communication was good. You got the pre-event messaging. That was fine. Still can't wait to meet up. But in between those dates, nothing. He didn't take you home or she didn't take you home to introduce you to friends, family. There was no little kind of text or anything in between, likely to fizzle out because there's nothing happening in between. Now, this is the scenario that you want with your events. You want to meet that person, the data matched, you're the right match. You've got the pre-event marketing, can't wait to meet you, can't wait to see you. You go on the date, you hit it off. In between the date, you get a little TikTok. They send you some messaging, a video, a text, something just to keep it going, which means you say, I can't wait till the next date. And that is that in-between event communication we're talking about. You go with your marketer and make sure you're getting those in between happy moments, introduce you to friends and family, build community. That is how it all manifests into something that's really rich and not just a series of event dates that you just pick up and drop when you feel. Now, for anyone that's not dating and is married, I'm just giving you insight into the dating world here. But hopefully you treat those event dates like that third scenario and not the first two. Did that make sense, Paulina? Are you following me here?
I've been literally giggling on mute over here. I'm in the latter camp where I'm married, so it's been a minute, but I think it's cute, and I think it's a really nice way to sort of visualize this trend that we're seeing. I think, everything you mentioned is so true. We don't want it to feel like the events that we're designing and producing for our attendees live and breathe in those sort of live event dates. And, so much of what we design is around fostering a community, whether it's a community of customers, community of members, a community of prospects. But, at the same time, we don't want that community to just live in that one event experience. So creating this sort of more connected programs, extending those relationships and the experiences, I think just tells a really wonderful marketing story and community story as well. So with that, let's get moving on to trend number 3. But before we do, we didn't want this to just be my voice and Felicia's voice. We wanted to kick it off with one of our customers' voices, Sabrina Myers, and let her share some of her predictions, for 2023 trends.
Hello there, I'm Sabrina Myers from Hot Hospitality Exchange, and the key event trend that I'm forecasting for 2023 is immersion. I think event attendees are consuming content completely differently now, so immersion in mind when it comes to event design and how your attendees are going to be consuming content is going to be the way forward, because it's all about attention economy now. So my trend is immersion.
I absolutely love that segment. Everything she just said really resonates with me as an event designer, right? We're talking about new levels of attention span. People are craving unique content, whether it's traditional content by way of presentation, whether it's unique production offerings. It's how is digital amplifying your in-person experiences? How is digital enhancing your already existing virtual programs? I mean, in 2023, in-person events are going to just flat out incorporate more digital touch points. That's, I think, a given. And by doing that, it really allows event marketers and planners to capture more valuable insights on attendee behavior. We're able to understand, interests and build more personalized attendee experiences. My gosh, we're going to get into that in a little bit. But, more digital touch points allows the opportunity to extend engagement, extend these sort of immersion experiences, and allows for your event to go beyond the traditional start and end dates like we were just talking about. So I think what's really important is to understand attendee expectations for what they're going to consume, whether it's an in-person or virtual experience. Why are people coming to your event, right? Are they coming because the in-person experience offers that face-to-face connection or relationship building? Or are they attending your webinar because they really want to understand quick hit, factual, key takeaways that are really presentation based? And I think it's not just one or the other. It's a beautiful blend. I actually just saw, hold on, where is it? Kelsey in the chat. Has anyone had success with recording in-person sessions and offering as an on-demand package post-event? That is like exactly what we're talking about. And I think depending on your event content, there are ways where the digital offering can really enhance that in-person experience. And Kelsey, for us, particularly for our Cvent Connect US annual conference, we offer so many on-site sessions, and you can only go to one session per time block. So by way of capturing those in-person sessions, making them available in the on-demand experience post-event, it allows those attendees to say, okay, you know what, because I can't go to I have to pick one or the other, but it doesn't mean I'm missing out on the learnings or the experience. I can just tune in later, following the in-person event dates. Similarly for virtual experience, right? You can still only attend one session at a time technically. And I think this is just another opportunity where we're able to extend that content experience, that experience that our attendees are so craving, in multiple ways. I think one thing that we kind of get hung up on, and Felicia, I'm smiling because you and I talk about this all the time, but on a global scale, we've kind of gone from one zinger word to the next, right? It's pivot. Nobody wants to hear that word. I feel like I'm, a broken record here, but I'm almost feeling like people don't want to hear the word hybrid either. And it almost has this connotation of hybrid means more money, means more complication, it's more comprehensive. But I think what's important is to note that hybrid is really just about digital elements enhancing or being a part of your event experience, right? Like, I think, what are your thoughts around that sentiment?
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I would, because, we talk about this. I don't know if many of you know, but we put together Cvent Connect Europe, which is our flagship event that happens in Europe. And Paulina takes care of Cvent Connect US. And we sit there and we think about the program, and we think about, okay, we are going to have some kind of at-home audience. What do we want to give that audience? And that's how we come at it. We're not like, okay, we need to develop a hybrid event. What's the hybrid event going to do? We're much more like, what would that at-home audience like to consume, when, and how would they like to consume the content that's happening at this event? And Paulina was really good to talk me into, maybe we just stream one room. Like, maybe it's just that simple, because you're probably not going to be at home jumping around from one room to another trying to figure out which live stream's happening next. And at first, me being a content person, I'm like, no, we need to, get all the content out there immediately. And she's like, really? Would you consume like that? And good on you, Paulina. You talked me into the right thing to do, because I think when we look at our data, and that's a good thing, you should use your data, look at it and see how people are behaving, and then design your event for them like that. So I love this use of the term digital elements. It might not always be a stream. It might just be, we did capture it, but we captured it with you in mind in the first place. I mean, you've heard lots of people say, don't just stick the camera in the back of the room. That's true. Maybe that's not how I'd like to consume that content. But if I'm thinking about you up front, I'm going to ensure that my digital pieces make sense for you, I really come with my marketer hat on here, but I know I'm going to leave you to the next trend, Paulina. Trend number 4.
Yes, trend number 4. So actually, we're going to do another customer video for trend number 4. We're going to hear from Jason Greenman.
My name is Jason Greenman. I'm the founder of Acomo in Barcelona, and my trend for 2023 will certainly not be the most popular one, but I'm talking about the big R word, and that's the recession. The recession is going to cause some very specific challenges to the industry and to event planners that we need to start preparing for. I believe that the demand for events will continue to be strong. We're seeing that in our own business. However, there will be adjustments that we'll have to make in terms of budgets, sizes, types of events that we're working with, in order to make sure that we continue to provide the same quality events that we've always been doing in the past. So I'm very confident that the events industry can take this on head on, this challenge, as we always have. And but that is my word for 2023.
Love it. This was the big one in the poll, really, wasn't it, Paulina, about cost savings and efficiencies? And I know when we first spoke about this trend, you were kind of saying, we've always had to be super efficient as planners. So, we've got to just, really tighten our belts whilst delivering good experiences.
No, exactly. And, I think Jason touches on a couple things that stand out to me. We've dealt with, challenges in the past. To your point, Felicia, I don't believe many of the organizers tuning in today have said, I have a huge budget and I'm going to spend it all. But I think, we're being mindful about our spend right now. And I think instead of using the recession R word, I think I want to use the ROI R word, right? It's all about our return on investment. It's this intense focus on saying, like I said before, making these really decisive decisions around spend when it comes to our event programs. I think, yes, we're going to be operating with tighter budgets, but to achieve greater efficiencies, to reduce costs, to increase visibility across meetings and events, we're going to have to do a lot of things. And most notably, and I think what we'll see across the tech space is that there's going to be a consolidation of spend on the tech stack, right? And so anywhere there's an opportunity to use a single platform, have a single source of truth, particularly as it relates to, event data, I think that's where we're going to start to see efficiencies and cost savings. Now, if you're talking about, budget impact to individual events, I think it's all about leaning into technology for cost savings, right? So, if you typically have overhead spend on temp staff, right, supporting your check-in experience to different sessions, is there an automated way where you're not paying a temp person by the hour to scan people in, but rather you're using NFC tap and go? There are certainly a number of ways that we could think about tech supporting cost savings. Of course, there is investment in the tech, but what you're able to do with that investment is say, okay, I'm not paying an individual person. There is sort of this automation. The data that's being driven into that tech is also leveraged for the value, right? We're able to say there are leads coming in, by people attending certain sessions. So I think one of the other big pieces, which kind of relates back to trend number one, right? This sort of race for space, race for resources, is drive cost savings with the right vendors, reestablishing those relationships with people who you've partnered with in the past, people who understand your programs and say, hey, you know what? If you cut, the second day, or if you make this day a half day of programming, you save X amount of dollars. As you start to think strategically about your event design in partnership with your vendors, in partnership with evaluating the tech and the tools that you evaluate your programs with, you're going to start to see unique efficiencies and ways to find cost savings across the board. Anything else you want to add in there, Felicia?
Yeah, I was just reading the chat. I hope if you see my eyes go down, it's because I'm reading what people are saying. And someone just said, one event, not a contract that they negotiated. The F&B went up 25%, service fees went up too. Seems a little extreme, along with all the other rising costs and fewer concessions being given by hotels with conference space. I feel for you because, we are seeing those rises too. And I think there's this, you're talking about buzzwords, this explosion of in-person events. It's a real thing, and that is causing an issue where negotiation does become a little bit more tricky, because there isn't that moment where the hotels and the conference centres are worried about filling their space. They're actually probably, oversubscribed, and so they've got costs to meet, and then they pass those costs on to everyone else. But like Paulina just said, it's the design of your event that can help you to save those. I know sometimes you can't cut everything, but it's about getting creative with how you design your event to see where do you get that return. Paulina and I happen to be doing another webinar in a couple of days' time, and I know we were talking recently about sponsors and how they can help as well in terms of covering some of those costs of your food and beverage, or sponsoring an evening event, or something that can just help to bring return on investment to not just you, but your sponsor as well, and therefore your attendees. And so there are clever ways that you can work around it. Not fun times, but it's just about getting a little bit more creative than maybe we have done in the past.
I definitely want to just add one little anecdotal story here, because we were just talking about hybrid, and as we were designing our 2021 Cvent Connect program, we were saying, okay, let's think about the virtual experience. We didn't have huge budgets. We were trying to find ways to offset costs. And so maybe you have a traditional in-person only event and you're looking for a new revenue stream, but it doesn't mean, onboarding a brand new large scale sponsor. For us, we offered a paid for virtual experience. It can be a nominal amount. I think we started with $99 in terms of value. I think, we've modified that to be a lower value, but that's a net new revenue stream. And what we saw in 2021 was that revenue stream of people who were finding value in consuming the virtual experience offset the cost of an evening event. right? So there is significant change, impact that you can create around your in-person event by adding in a virtual experience. I think, Kelsey, just going back to your comment in the chat, is there value in capturing the content on site and then making it available on demand? Definitely. If you want to make people purchase it, that's another level of revenue generation that you can use to offset the costs of some of these rising, food and beverage costs and room costs too. So just wanted to throw in that little anecdotal story because it's a true thing that happened for us, and we found tons of value in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can attest to that. So with that, let's move on to trend number 5. I'm like, where am I? Am I 4 or 5? I'm definitely at 5. And that is more strategic use of event data. Now, you heard me mention this before. When you have the data, you can definitely craft your events with your attendees in mind, making sure that you are meeting them where they are with what they want to see, what they want to know. We spoke briefly about content before. If you understand their behavior at your previous events, you can shape your content in the right way. You can make sure that your room sizes even are the right sizes because you've counted how many people attended particular sessions. There is so much you can do with data. Now, what you can't do, or what you might struggle to do, is if you have disparate data, unconnected systems, you're using 5 different pieces of technology to produce one event, or even to do your marketing, and it doesn't integrate with your event systems. Suddenly that view of what's happening with your attendees and with your audience is slightly skewed. Here we're talking about cost savings. You need to be able to drive efficiencies through the use of your data and the use of your technology. We know that training different teams on different pieces of technology drains resources. People get really frustrated. They feel like they're overworked because, you've got different ways of doing things on different systems. It's really hard as well when you're thinking about things like sustainability, which we will talk about at some point. It's really hard to enforce your policies and your standards when you've got lots of different things happening all over the place. So, we would often encourage you to have that view where you can look at, well, what's happening? Well, how do I put in meeting request forms for my team members so that the meetings all come one way? There's a standardized form and a standardized process so that I can make sure that the right things are in place to ensure that we're having the right meetings with the right guidance. Maybe you've only got a set number of virtual, a set number of in-person that you would like to push out to your organization. And that's how you can do that in that one place. Also, when you have the right technology, you can improve the actionability of the events and the attendee data. Like I said, what are you going to do next? What decisions will you take next based on the data that you get in through your system? And it gives you that holistic picture of not only your attendees, but also your suppliers. You can start to see what's happening maybe with your venue sourcing and look at that in one place. How many venues have we sourced over the past year? How many of those met this standard? How many of those gave us that particular type of room? You really want to try and ensure that you have this uniform approach to what you're doing. That also helps with your branding, your communication. You start to look the same to the people that you're talking to. There's consistency. I mean, there's just so many benefits of having that aggregated data and that view, whether it's looking at average cost, average attendance, looking at your total event program. There's just so much. You can tell I'm super passionate about data. I always used to say, events could have seemed a bit like a black hole for us marketers because we use data so much when we're looking at our digital marketing efforts, email clicks, open rates. Did they go to where you wanted them to go to? Did they get that CTA? And sometimes when we used to look at our events, it was like, okay, they went maybe and they did some stuff. But now we are trying to make sure that that data integrates back with our marketing systems and we can look at that, one view of our attendees and the people coming along to our sessions and to our marketing materials. So, Paulina, I don't know if you wanted to add something into that. I know that you use data as well. We often partner together on that view of data. Anything to
Yes.
add?
Yeah. I mean, everything you just said, you are the queen of data, so you know what you're talking about here. But I saw Lisa in the chat mention, don't forget to highlight the ROI attendees receive in terms of the value of face-to-face networking and relationship building. And that kind of speaks to that. attendee personalization, right? That hyper personalization. And, as I think about what we do for conferences, I think it's kind of table stakes at this point to offer the convince your boss letter, right? What am I going to get as an attendee out of going to this event? Beyond the, accreditations or continued education credits, what else are they going to get out of this? And right. And so speaking to that, what we're doing for Cvent Connect this year in the US and actually for Connect Europe as well is we are thinking about our attendees in this sort of hyper personalized way where we're saying, you're joining us within, this particular industry. You're joining us within this particular role. You're joining us as this particular level user. And, actually, I definitely encourage some of you to check this out. But Amazon does a really good job of creating these sort of attendee guides. And that was, sort of the inspiration around how we're giving these customized guides in terms of as this persona in this role, this is what you're going to get out of going to this conference. Not only is it this continuing education, but 50 plus opportunities to network and extend your sort of professional network. Here's a way where you can do knowledge sharing for people in your exact role in this particular roundtable on Tuesday morning. And then finally, we're looking to offer peer-to-peer networking meetups, right? So if you are, an event professional working for Google and you want to meet with someone who's in a similar role in the similar space, you can use our appointment system and say, hey, any interest in having a chat or having a coffee with me to talk about any kind of shared challenges or shared interests as it relates to our particular roles in the industry. So it's all about facilitating not just the organic, let's meet at lunch type of experience, but something a little more structured, a little programmed. We like to think of it as programmed networking that just gives them a little more to sort of explain, the value that they're going to be getting out of the conference beyond those sort of traditional takeaways. So I think hyper personalization is certainly going to be something that we're focusing on, and I think the industry will be as well.
Absolutely. I'm loving that you're all so chatty. It's so good to see you all talking and sharing, details with each other. Keep that going. I think having this community of people that you can talk to, amazing. Now, speaking about community, that moves us nicely into our next one. I'm so pumped up to talk about this trend number 6, just because I've just come back from the States where I got to see Paulina in person. I was very, very happy. And now we're back in our distant continents. But this internal events stepping into the spotlight. We just had our biggest internal event of the year, well, one of them. There's another one happening next week in India. But this idea of, cost cutting and, hey, maybe we'll cut the internal events. Absolutely not. That cannot happen. I think the internal event we had last year, our company-wide kickoff, was just so refreshing. People came in, thinking what's going to happen. Someone new. We had so many new, staff members because we've grown so much. And actually, what it did is it just injected that Cvent company culture into absolutely everybody, whether they were new, whether they've been there 10, 15 years, everyone was just so pumped up. And I think that only happens when you put an investment into your internal events. Now, part of it's because we were in person, yes, but we also had watch parties all across the globe, and people at home were slacking me and texting me and sending messages going, oh my God, this is awesome. So you can never underestimate the power of your internal events. It does so much. You can see me, I'm buzzing. I put it all over my LinkedIn. If you go and find me on LinkedIn, you'll see all of our messages going, it's amazing. And that's what you do for your employees when you keep your internal events. Pauline, I know you helped to organize all of that. So
yeah,
thanks.
I mean, I'm still in recovery from such a crazy, amazing week, but I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I'm still reeling from just being able to see people who I haven't seen in person for over 3 years. It was just such a really nostalgic, but kind of inspiring experience. I think, one thing that's worth noting is that internal events aren't, I don't think they should be a second priority. I think there is very much what you saw on the slide earlier. It's a C-level priority in terms of, establishing workplace culture, just like Felicia mentioned. There is this kind of notion that we're working in disparate ways across disparate locations and time zones, but there's so much value in connecting when we're all together, and reaffirming that professional community, that community that's so very much a part of most organizations. I think the other piece to this, which I think is interesting, is internal events have an opportunity to create brand awareness. They're almost like an extension of your marketing strategy, right? So as Felicia was mentioning, she's sharing it all over her LinkedIn and different social networks. That is affirming the brand. That's affirming the experiences. That speaks to other employees, whether you're, in a hiring scenario, but it also works in a retention scenario. I also think it helps establish the brand for prospective customers, knowing that they are investing and supporting their employees by way of hosting these events. Like Felicia mentioned earlier, it's harder to establish or report out on the ROI, because these are sort of, softer metrics that we're using. But I think there's something there, right? There's something there to extend your corporate brand experience or corporate brand marketing strategy by way of leveraging your internal event programs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we see it as a trend for 2023, because you might be wondering, we do internal events, but I think I'm going to reiterate it. It's about, as those costs rise, it's about finding smart ways to keep those internal events happening. I know, we've got remote working now, lots of flexi working. So your community isn't having a chance to come together as much as they maybe did before. So even if you said, hey, everybody, let's all go to this event. So I know for us, Confex is coming up soon in Europe. We might say, hey, guys, and we do this. We say, staff, go. It's a free event. Let's go. After that, we're going to go to the pub and then we'll get together, because you've had that chance to be educated, have a good time out another event, and then get your staff and your team together. Often we see each other at events, in fact, and that's how we start to rebuild. Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. You go to another event, and you can do that with your internal staff. So make sure you keep that going for 2023, despite the rising costs. So I think we're at our 7th and final trend, Paulina.
We are.
I know we have a video to kick this one off as well. It's one of my favorites. So why don't we roll video?
I'm Inge Bouwens. I'm senior lead at Eurostar for Business, and my trend for 2023 is sustainable travel. I think customers should be given the choice to travel by train if they want to, and our merger with Thalys is going to make European rail a lot easier.
So now I'm aware that in the chat someone said they were happy this was not number one, which fair enough. I know we've been talking about sustainability and ESG goals for a while, but it is something that is very important and top of mind for people at the moment, and it should be. Inga was from Eurostar there that you saw. Eurostar, if you don't know, is a Europe-based train company that takes people from London to Paris and Brussels and Amsterdam. And funnily enough, we had IBTM last year in Barcelona, and there was a bunch of people who decided, you know what, we're going to take the train. I know it's not as easy to do that in the US, but they did that over here, and they almost did it as a group activity where they got on the train and they went to IBTM to just try and see if they could be a bit more sustainable with train travel. And that's something that the attendees did by themselves. So it wasn't even, the event planning team that said, hey, why don't you take the train? They decided that's just something they wanted to do. I know that, you may have been to a lot of sessions on sustainability, accessibility over the past few years, but it's almost been as a bit of a, maybe we should think about that. And what we're saying is the trend for this year is a much more, we should definitely think about that in front of the event, not as an afterthought. We should think about it by design. I'm going to give you an example. We're going, like I said, to Confex in just over a month's time, and we phoned, Zoomed, whatever we do these days, our designer that built our stand last year. And they said, you've got two options. You can either take something that we did for you last year before, and we can kind of reskin it and make it work, or we can build something new. And hey, we're thinking about cost, we're thinking about sustainability and the environment. We're like, hey, well, why don't we just reskin what we've used already? They're like, it's in our warehouse. We can just get it out, dust it off, and do what you need to do to make it look right for this year. And I think it's that kind of thing. We are approaching our events with this in mind, rather than going and then saying, okay, well, let's look at food waste. that is important. But if we didn't think about that before we even head to the event, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of those types of situations where we can reuse what we've used before. Now, when we first looked at this trend come up, I know Paulina was like, that's not a trend. That just should be. That just is. It's not a today, here today, gone tomorrow. Paulina, why were you feeling like that?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny now that I think back on my initial reaction. I'm like, oh, okay. But the idea is, when I think about a trend, it's going to kind of lose steam over time, or it dissipates over time. And for me, and many of these shouldn't necessarily have that sort of inference, but for this one in particular, we as a team at Cvent are really taking. We've charged ourselves this year with making this a priority. That the events that we design, whether they're small internal programs to our largest customer-facing marquee events, there should be an immediate checklist. And that checklist should always incorporate ESG and diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, design elements in mind. We're still working through what's possible and how to prioritize our event design sort of fundamentals checklist, if you will. But it's, for me, something that I think is only going to gather steam. It's going to evolve. It's going to be a part of our sort of innate or foundational event design practices. For us, we're just starting out, right? I think our team is seeing what we can do from a sustainability perspective. Felicia just mentioned, leaning on train travel. I'm thinking about our Cvent Connect Europe experience, and there were the train strikes, so that kind of gives me a little heartburn thinking about it. But there's certainly ways that we can think about, reappropriating our investment that doesn't have a carbon footprint impact, right? So, leaning on local teams to support smaller regional programs, or perhaps even leaning on suppliers in the industry for temp staffing, depending on, how you appropriate your costs. Thinking about how we can reduce overall air travel is certainly one of the top ways to think about sustainability efforts. I think a large piece for us is accessibility, and really leaning into what the Cvent technology can do to just ensure that we're providing an experience to as many people, and not limiting their experience by way of, visually participating, or being able to communicate with their community. We're really, really focused on enhancing our accessibility offering. In fact, yesterday internally, the marketing org, we had one of our colleagues who I really hope he does a session at Cvent Connect. I'm sure he'll do a webinar coming up, but it was essentially designing a websites with accessibility in mind for marketers. And immediately my mind goes to, well, we need to do an audit of all of our event websites, and how are we managing our emails and communication strategy and ensuring that accessibility is in mind. And there was just so much that we uncovered that we can do, just from like a foundational perspective. So there's tons of goodness there, and I'm happy to hear that my peers on the marketing side are thinking about how our corporate sites look from a accessibility perspective. But those of us charged with designing these beautiful and memorable event experiences, we should be designing those programs with accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind, right? I think, we can take stock of what we've done over the last year and always use that as a benchmarking opportunity to get better, whether it's, offering more diverse speakers or diverse food and beverage options or less waste, right? There's all of these things that we can start to track. And my recommendation is, start with what you can manage, start small, and each year let's continue to get better and better. We've partnered with organizations like the Events Industry Council, and they're doing, a whole standardization around, monitoring and reporting and measuring your, sustainability efforts across your event programs. We've worked with event design on this as well. So there's tons of partners and suppliers in the industry who can support, the decisions that you're making and ensure that you're making the right decisions around the sustainability efforts that we've kind of chatted about thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, that by design is so important. I see that, Carol agrees ESG needs to be fundamentally included in event design. I couldn't agree more. And we're trying to help within our product as well, by ensuring that we provide the standards that you need when you are designing your events. Little tip if you didn't know, we're looking at those accessibility templates that help you to build your websites without having to know everything that you need from an accessibility standpoint. It can be hard, and that's why, as Paulina was saying, leaning on your suppliers and your vendors to help with this is actually a fantastic thing to do. And so we as Cvent are going to definitely be trying to help within our product to ensure that you don't have to overthink. You'll get suggestions and tips. If you pick certain colors, it will just say, hey, that color that you've picked with, that text on the color isn't great for people that are trying to read this. So you might like to rethink it. And that's a really good way for you to not have to know everything without, when thinking about accessibility, because it is difficult. You won't know those things necessarily. So we're going to try and help where possible. Fantastic. So we have come to the end of our trends, but there's so much chatter happening and I'm seeing such great questions that I think I'd like to answer them all. Paulina?
Yeah. I did see a question come through via the Q&A panel. So before we kind of cover all of the event trends, here they are listed out for all of you. But one of the questions that came through from Drew, for companies that are doing hybrid events, do you expect to see in-person attendance to increase back to pre-COVID numbers? I don't know if I can commit to saying yes, just because that R word is lingering, and I imagine budgets that support programs that attendees for events for attendees to go to may be impacted. I think we're going to see a steady incline. I don't think we're going to see pre-COVID numbers just this year, given some of the ongoing macroeconomics at play. But I think, from our perspective, as we look at contracting, we're still contracting very conservatively. In areas where we're projecting growth, sub 10%. If we exceed that, I was telling Felicia on another webinar, it's always easier to ask for more later in the game than try to reduce back. So I think we're going to see a steady incline of attendee growth. But I think, as event organizers, we should be mindful on how we contract and contract conservatively.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I know it sounds weird and I shouldn't say it, but I'm not sure I want the pre-COVID number straight away. I know it sounds odd because you're always like more attendees, but I feel that we're able to shape our programs in a much more strategic way when we're not just going for the numbers and we're actually going for, well, why are we doing this event? What are those people going to get? What's that group going to get? What's that audience going to get? And one of the things that we're doing, giving away absolute company secrets here, but it shouldn't be, in our marketing department, is we've typically been focused on what we call MQL. So it's like those marketing qualified leads. And for us, it's like, hey, they came, great. And that's to the website, to emails, they came, great. What we're now looking to shift into, which we really should be doing anyway as marketers and event planners, is the conversion. What did they get from you? What they needed? Are they able to convert? And by that, and from an event perspective, I mean, they came in your machine one way. Did they leave with what you wanted them to leave with? Did they leave feeling changed, educated? Did they leave with all of the goodness and the richness that you wanted them to get? Because if you just get numbers and they came in and they left, then you didn't really convert them in that way. They haven't transformed in any kind of way. So numbers, it's always a good thing to say we got more than last year, but actually if they are different from what you got last year, it's not too bad, as long as they're doing what you want them to do at the end of the day. Hopefully our marketing leaders are not like, what are you doing? You're giving away company secrets. So should we just run down and have a look back at these event trends and just to leave you with the final 7 trends?
Yeah. I mean,
go for it, Polly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a healthy view of, what we are projecting or forecasting for trends. I think some of you have shared throughout the chat some other ones that I think could have made a nice 8, 9, or 10 to this list. So, come back to us in a future webinar. I'm sure there are probably topics that we're really diving into at a later date. But yeah, I think this is a pretty healthy list, and hopefully you all agree with these being trends to keep an eye out for, to manage, and to sort of tackle head on. I think we are just about at time, but I really, want to echo what Felicia was sharing before. You all have been super active in the chat. The questions have been wonderful. The engagement has been really nice. I think we just hope that you all tune back in for a future webinar. If you haven't already, the survey for today's webinar is live. So jump in there, give us some feedback. Who was your favorite presenter? It's okay if you choose Felicia. But really, we love activating off of your feedback and commentary to improve our webinar programs and other future event programs alike. In addition to that, we have some other webinars that Felicia's going to highlight for you to tune into in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. Coming up, I mentioned this earlier, on the 2nd of Feb, you've got Paulina and I again. Brighten your perspective, learning from your 2022 events to prepare for 2023. Now, today was a trend webinar, so we were looking at what we think, but this is much more what we learned. What happened before, so we can think about what is going to happen next. We definitely have a series of webinars coming up, which you can find on our events page. There's always new webinars coming, and they are segmented, so there's always something for everybody. Feel free to head over to that on cvent.com. But yeah, that's great. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. And if you have any more questions, I'm sure you can get them in through the survey. That means I'm encouraging you to fill that out.
Thanks all.